After 22 years of marriage, he asked for a divorce, so I left him with nothing. After 22 years of marriage, you think you know a person. You think you've built something real, something strong enough to survive whatever life throws at you. That's what I believed about us. Me and Thomas. We weren't perfect. No couple is. But we'd built a life together. Raised 2 kids. Paid off a house. Weathered financial struggles, job changes, sickness, and all the little everyday battles that stack up over decades. We were a team. Or at least, that's what I thought. Until the night he sat across from me at our kitchen table. The same table we'd eaten 1,000 family dinners at. And told me flatly, like he was reciting the weather report, that he wanted a divorce. No fight. No breakdown. No, we need to talk. Just divorce. Like it was some logical next step. Like we were discussing who was picking up milk from the grocery store. I remember staring at him, waiting for the part where he explained. Where he softened. Where he showed even an ounce of emotion for the life we'd built. But Thomas? He didn't even flinch. He told me he wasn't happy. That he needed to find himself. That after all these years, he felt like he'd been living for everyone but himself. And when I asked if there was someone else, because let's be honest, there's always someone else, he didn't even deny it. He just shrugged, as if the answer didn't matter anymore. That was the moment I realized. This man, the man I had loved for half my life, was already gone. And if he was going to walk away like I was nothing, then I was going to show him exactly how much nothing could cost. You don't stay married for 22 years without building something. We didn't have a fairy tale marriage. We weren't one of those couples always holding hands in public or taking extravagant vacations every year. We were regular. We were real. We built a life out of hard work, compromise, and frankly, surviving the kind of days nobody posts about on social media. I married Thomas when we were both young and figuring things out. Back then, we didn't have much, just a tiny apartment, big dreams, and a lot of growing up to do. We grew careers. We grew a home. We grew a family. There were years when we barely scraped by. Years when I stayed up late balancing bills while Thomas worked 2 jobs. Years when he stayed patient with me through postpartum depression and sleepless nights with crying babies. And somehow, through all of that, we stayed us. Or so I thought. I won't lie, things got comfortable. Maybe too comfortable. We had routines. We had inside jokes. We had matching coffee mugs from a beach trip neither of us really enjoyed, but both pretended to love, because that's what couples do. We had built a life that looked ordinary from the outside. But to me, it was ours. It was enough. I thought it was enough for him, too. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Not that Thomas wanted something different, but that he'd already decided our life, the one we had built brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, wasn't worth fighting for anymore. He didn't want to fix it. He didn't want counseling. He didn't want space to think. He wanted out. And the quiet finality of that decision, that's what shook me to my core. Because when someone tells you they want to start over without you, you start to see every memory differently. Not sweeter, not softer, but like a roadmap of every place they were already walking away from. Looking back, the signs were there. Not dramatic ones, not lipstick on a collar or mysterious late-night calls like in the movies. No, Thomas wasn't careless like that. He was calculated. It started small. Longer hours at work that didn't add up to promotions or pay raises. Weekend conferences that always seemed last minute and never included me. The distance wasn't sudden. It was slow. Conversations got shorter. Dinners got quieter. Texts went unanswered longer than they ever used to. And the excuses? They were just believable enough to avoid an argument, but thin enough to leave me staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. wondering why things didn't feel right anymore. At first, I thought it was us. Maybe we were just in a rut, a phase like so many couples go through after years of routines and responsibilities. I told myself we needed a vacation, a project together, more date nights. But Thomas didn't want more. He wanted out. And I didn't fully understand that until one night, I caught him sitting in his car in the driveway long after he'd come home. Just sitting there, phone in hand, smiling at a screen, not rushing inside to me, not decompressing from work, but lingering, in a place where he didn't have to be a husband or a father or anyone except whoever he was texting. I didn't confront him that night, not because I didn't want to, but because in that moment, I knew whatever version of Thomas the First was holding on to in my mind wasn't the man sitting in that car. The man I had loved, he was gone long before he said the words out loud. I just hadn't been ready to see it, but I see it now. And seeing it made one thing very clear to me. If he wanted to be free of me so badly, he was going to learn exactly what that freedom cost. There's this moment in every breakup, especially after a long marriage, where your brain still tries to fight for what your heart already knows is gone. At first, I went through all the motions. I asked him if we could go to counseling. He said it wasn't necessary. I asked if this was really about someone else. He told me that was complicated. I asked if he was really ready to throw away 2 decades of life together. And do you know what he said? He said, "It's not about throwing it away. It's about moving forward." As if moving forward didn't involve completely erasing me from the future he was building. That was the moment it clicked for me. Thomas wasn't confused. He wasn't lost. He wasn't struggling with the weight of a hard decision. He was finished. And suddenly I was done too. Done trying to pull someone back who had clearly already packed his emotional bags long before I ever saw them at the door. Done sitting at a table begging for crumbs of affection from a man who had already moved his heart somewhere else. Done wondering why I wasn't enough for a version of him that no longer existed. I didn't yell. I didn't cry, at least not in front of him. I didn't even argue. I just sat there, letting the silence stretch between us, until he realized I wasn't going to ask him to stay anymore. And when he told me we needed to talk about dividing things up, I nodded. Because, we were absolutely going to talk about dividing things. Just not in the way he thought. He wanted freedom. He wanted out. And that was fine. But if he was walking away from me like I was nothing, then I was going to show him exactly how expensive nothing could be. Thomas thought I'd fall apart. That's what still amazes me the most. After everything we'd built, after everything we'd been through, he truly believed I would crumble the second he said he wanted a divorce. He thought I'd cling, beg, lose control. He thought I'd be too emotional to think clearly, too broken to protect myself, too lost to see what was coming. But Thomas forgot who he married. He forgot that I was the one who held everything together all those years. When our son got suspended and he didn't know how to talk to him, I was the one who stepped in. When the roof started leaking 2 days before Thanksgiving, I was the one who found the contractor and managed the repairs while hosting a house full of people. When his mother got sick and he couldn't process the grief, I was the one who made sure the funeral arrangements were handled with care and that he had space to feel whatever he needed. I was the emotional backbone, the calendar keeper, the person who knew how to make a dollar stretch and a crisis look invisible. And yet he looked me in the eye and assumed I wouldn't see the divorce coming, or worse, that I wouldn't know how to survive it. But I didn't just survive. I planned. I called an attorney, a woman sharp and steady, who didn't flinch when I said I wanted everything that was mine. And then some. I opened a private account. I went through our finances line by line, tracing every transaction, noting the ones that didn't make sense. I started asking quiet questions. And when I found out where the money had been going, who he had been spending it on, I didn't scream. I just took notes. Because if he thought I'd be too devastated to protect myself, he was about to learn what devastation looks like when it stops crying and starts documenting. Thomas had always been careful with details. He liked to think of himself as disciplined, the kind of man who kept spreadsheets, organized receipts, cleared his browser history without ever needing a reason. He paid his bills early, set up automatic transfers, color-coded the family budget like it was a business proposal. It's part of what made me trust him for so long. He wasn't impulsive. He was methodical. But methodical people always have patterns. And when you've lived with someone for more than 2 decades, you learn those patterns by heart. He didn't expect me to start checking things. He assumed I'd be too hurt, too overwhelmed to think clearly, that I'd accept his version of the divorce without digging into the details. But I wasn't interested in his version. I was interested in the truth. So I did what I'd always done. I paid attention. And the more I looked, the more I found. Hotel reservations billed to a rewards card I didn't know he was still using. Meals that didn't match his calendar. Gifts charged to an account that was never tied to our household name. Transfer amounts that didn't belong to any shared expenses we had ever agreed on. I didn't jump to conclusions. I didn't accuse him. I just collected. Because every charge told a story. And that story had a second character. Someone he'd quietly been building a new life with while still living in mine. She didn't interest me. Not because I didn't care, but because she wasn't the one who owed me anything. Thomas did. And if he thought he could just rewrite the ending to our marriage without consequence, if he believed he could unthread me from our life without paying attention to what I'd held together for so long, then he'd forgotten who I really was. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was preparing. And when I was finished, He wouldn't just regret what he did. He'd finally understand what it means to be left with nothing. When I sat down across from my attorney for the first time, I remember wondering if I looked as tired as I felt. I wasn't emotional in the way people expect when you say the word divorce. I wasn't weepy. I wasn't angry, not in that wild, explosive way you see in movies. I was quiet, steady, exhausted, yes, but very clear on what I wanted and what I didn't want. I told her everything. The sudden announcement. The way Thomas had already begun dividing up our life like it was nothing more than a spreadsheet. The other woman, or at least the financial trail leading to her. I expected her to be sympathetic, maybe even surprised, but she wasn't. She was calm, direct, professional in the kind of way that lets you know you've chosen the right person. She didn't ask me if I wanted revenge. She asked me what mattered most. And that question, more than anything, brought me back to myself. What mattered? Peace, security, dignity. Thomas could have his freedom. I wasn't going to beg him to stay where he didn't want to be. But he wasn't going to get to walk away from 2 decades of partnership without facing the cost of that choice. Not when I had built so much of our life. Not when I had raised our children, managed our home, handled our finances, and supported his every ambition. We didn't just share a house. We shared a life. And if he wanted out, truly wanted out, then he was going to pay for it. Fairly, legally, thoroughly. My attorney didn't flinch at any of it. She took notes, asked precise questions, and looked me in the eye as she said something I will never forget. He wants to leave like none of this matters? Fine. We'll show him how much it does. And right then and there I knew. This wasn't going to end the way Thomas thought it would. Once I had a plan in place, everything changed. Not overnight. Not loudly. But quietly inside me. It's strange how peace and strategy can sit side by side like that. Thomas thought he had me cornered. He really believed that the person sitting across from him at the dinner table was still the same heartbroken, blindsided woman from that first night he asked for a divorce. But what he didn't understand, what men like him never understand, is that heartbreak doesn't last forever. Clarity comes next. And when clarity shows up, that's when you become dangerous. I stopped arguing with him. Stopped asking questions about where he was going, or who he was with, or when he'd be back. I stopped looking for explanations that wouldn't come. Instead, I started preparing. Every conversation became a mental note. Every financial document I could access, I saved. Every asset, the cars, the house, the investments I used to let him handle while I handled everything else, became a checklist. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not friends. Not family. This wasn't a story I wanted played out in group chats or whispered over wine. This was strategy. This was business. Because the man sitting across from me no longer operated like my husband. He was operating like an opponent, so I matched his energy. Quietly, patiently, intentionally. And the more I gathered, the calmer I felt. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't surviving this marriage. I was building my exit. An exit where I wouldn't be left scrambling for scraps. An exit where I wouldn't be the woman crying in a courtroom while he sat there smug and untouched. An exit where I walked away with everything I deserved. And nothing less. The thing about Thomas is, he really believed he had the upper hand. Maybe it was arrogance. Maybe it was habit. After all, I had spent 2 decades being the one who kept things calm, steady, predictable. I was the planner, the fixer, the one who covered for him when he forgot things, birthdays, anniversaries, parent-teacher conferences. I was the glue. And like most people who benefit from someone else's emotional labor, Thomas never stopped to wonder what would happen if that glue decided to let go. While I was preparing for the divorce like it was a chess game, he was still playing checkers. I saw it in the way he moved through the house. Relaxed. Casual. Like this was just another inconvenience to deal with. Like splitting up our life was going to be as simple as dividing furniture and calling it done. He'd leave paperwork out on the counter without a second thought. Bank documents. New account statements. A car lease in his name only. Something flashy and unnecessary, like he was already trying on this new single-man life for size. I didn't say a word. Every new thing he left lying around was just more information. Every careless move was more proof. More leverage. I stayed quiet because I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to yell. People like Thomas don't respect noise. They respect results. And I was about to give him plenty of those. Watching him underestimate me? It didn't even make me angry anymore. It almost made me smile. Because what he didn't realize was that I wasn't clinging to what we used to have. I was done grieving the marriage. I wasn't fighting for him anymore. I was fighting for me. And when it came to protecting myself, my future, my dignity, my peace, I played a lot harder than he ever expected. When we finally got to the legal part, the court filings, the mediation sessions, the formal discussions about who got what, Thomas showed up like a man who expected to win. He wore his confidence like a tailored suit. Polished. Prepared. Smug. He thought the paperwork was just a formality. He thought the judge would side with him because he looked put together and said all the right things. He didn't realize that I had already spent months preparing. He didn't know that I had already handed my lawyer years' worth of financial documentation. He didn't know that I'd already accounted for every asset he tried to hide, the ones he shifted around before filing, assuming I wouldn't notice. And most of all, he didn't know that I wasn't afraid. Not of court. Not of him. Not of starting over. Because by then, I had already done the hard part. I'd already let go of the dream of growing old together. I'd already mourned the man I thought I'd married. I'd already accepted that the person sitting across from me was never coming back. So I didn't cry when he tried to minimize my contributions. I didn't flinch when he claimed things we both knew weren't his. I didn't even raise my voice when he lied. Because the truth was already in front of the court. In numbers. In dates. In documents with his signature. And that silence, my quiet, confident silence, was louder than anything he could say. He left that courtroom expecting to walk out with everything. Instead, he walked out looking like a man who'd just realized he'd spent 22 years married to a woman he never actually understood. And I walked out lighter. Not because I'd won something, but because I'd refused to let him take what I'd built. And that was everything. After the court decision was finalized, everything moved fast. Paperwork was signed. Accounts were closed. Titles transferred. The house, the cars, the investments, all formally divided in black and white. But the real weight of it didn't hit me until the day I walked back into that house by myself. No more temporary arrangements. No more waiting for hearings or decisions. Just me in the home we had built together. I stood in the doorway for a long time. Not crying. Not reliving memories. Just standing still, like I needed to give myself permission to breathe again. Everything looked the same. Same kitchen. Same couch. Same photos still waiting to be taken down. But it felt different. Not hollow. Not cold. Just still. Like the space had finally stopped holding its breath. I thought I'd feel broken. That's what people say after a long marriage ends, that you'll fall apart, feel unanchored, lost. But I didn't feel any of that. I felt clear. Because what Thomas didn't understand, what he never once stopped to consider, was that while he'd been quietly planning his exit, I'd been learning how to live without him. I'd been reclaiming space piece by piece. And now, the house was mine. Not just legally, energetically. It no longer felt like his footsteps were echoing in the hallway or his absence was some gaping wound I had to explain to people. It just felt mine. I made tea that evening and sat on the back patio, barefoot, quiet. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Because peace doesn't arrive with balloons and noise. It arrives when you realize you have nothing left to defend. And everything you need is already in your hands. People still ask me if I ever heard from him. If Thomas ever called to apologize. If he ever tried to explain himself. The answer is no. Not really. There was a half-hearted email months later. One of those vague, "I hope you're doing well" messages people send when they feel guilt tapping at them, but not enough to say anything real. I didn't respond. Because by then I didn't need an apology. I didn't need closure. I had created my own. And that, more than anything, is what surprised me. Not how much I lost, but how much I still had. I had my name, my independence, my memories, yes, but also my future. One that wasn't tethered to a man who saw me as disposable the second it suited him. He wanted freedom, and I gave it to him. But I also gave him the consequences of walking away from a woman who had stood by him for 22 years. He thought he was choosing a fresh start. He didn't realize he was also choosing to watch me rise, without him. And I did. Not with bitterness. Not with revenge. But with clarity. With intention. With a strength I never needed to shout to prove. In the end, I didn't leave him broken. I just left him without me. And that was more than enough. Sparkles, we hope you enjoyed the story. Have you ever watched someone underestimate your strength? And then regret it? What's the most powerful way you've ever reclaimed your peace? Would you have walked away the same way, or done something different? Speaking Head, share your story in the comments. We read every single one.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all, you're in the right place. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new savage ending. Because around here, karma always hits different.